Moving right along with these prediction videos, we got the Georgia Bulldogs. Can they go for the three-peat despite losing their quarterback and their offensive coordinator? Well, we're going to attempt to answer this question right now. But first, I want to make a disclaimer. First off, obviously, prediction video, we can only speculate. It doesn't matter until the actual games are played. But another disclaimer, too. You're going to listen to me say all these opponents Georgia has in the non-conference slate and say, damn, are they suddenly scared? Because Georgia doesn't really have a non-con opponent that sticks out as somebody that could trip them up. That was not the intention. Georgia was supposed to play a home-and-home series against Oklahoma. It ended up not coming to fruition, though, because if you're unaware, Oklahoma is going to be a member of the SEC next year. So by the time the second half of the home and home non-con is played, Oklahoma will be a member of the conference. So that is why Georgia and Oklahoma had to back out of the series. Now, could they have played it possibly at a neutral site? Maybe. But this is just how the cards fell, and Georgia had to find an opponent. In general, let me turn on the light. It's not dark. But anyway, Georgia had to find another opponent. And even if it wasn't necessarily the best opponent, they had to find an opponent to replace Oklahoma. And this is just simply how the cards fell for them. So anyway, Georgia is going to start off their year against the Tennessee Martin Skyhawks. Easy victory for Georgia here. And then the next week, Ball State Cardinals. Another easy victory. But then Georgia gets their first SEC game of the year against the South Carolina Gamecocks. The South Carolina Gamecocks last year surprised everybody. It looked like they were headed for another 6-6 year, but then they went 8-4, beat Tennessee in an upset, and then beat Clemson the next week in an upset. Now, they did lose their bowl game, but South Carolina still had a shocking year. Some people have some high expectations for South Carolina. I'm one of them. I believe South Carolina should get at least 8, maybe even 9 wins, and potentially challenge the SEC East, but I don't think they're ready yet to defeat Georgia. So give Georgia the victory here. Then you get the UAB Blazers. UAB, pretty good group of 5 team, but they're not going to beat a major Power 5 team, and especially not the Georgia Bulldogs. Give the victory to Georgia here. An interesting note also is that the first 4 games are home games for Georgia. Then Georgia gets their first road game. This will be against the Auburn Tigers. Now, Auburn I expect to be pretty good this year. I don't think they're going to compete for the West or the SEC, but I do think Auburn could win up to 8 or 9 games. They got a new head coach, Hugh Freeze, and Hugh Freeze has a reputation for turning around programs. However, it won't be in year 1. Auburn has major kinks to work out, talent issues. I just don't think they're ready yet to defeat Georgia. Give me the victory. Give the victory to Georgia in the game against Auburn. Then you go back home to face the Kentucky Wildcats. Kentucky, they've been stuck in neutral for a while. We've been expecting that year where Kentucky breaks out and wins the East, but it's not happened yet. So, therefore, go ahead and give me Georgia in this game. Then you go back on the road to play Vanderbilt. Not even going to spend a lot of time on this one. Georgia easily takes care of Vanderbilt here. Then the next week, you get your off week in the place it usually comes, which is right before your rivalry game against the Florida Gators. Florida, this is not the same Florida team from years past where they've competed for the SEC before. This Florida team is struggling for bowl relevancy. Now, next year they do have some good recruits coming in, so I do think starting next year they could start to come back. But I don't have major expectations for them this year. I do still think they could make a bowl game, but they are not going to compete for the SEC, and they 100% will not defeat Georgia. Give me Georgia here. Then you come back home and play Mizzou. I'm surprised Eli Drinkwitz is not somebody we talk about as being on the hot seat more. I think Eli Drinkwitz is probably the head coach with the biggest hot seat in the SEC this year. Mizzou has to get out of this rut of being a 500 team every year if Drinkwitz is going to keep his job. I think if they have a 500 year or worse, I think Eli Drinkwitz, they'll move on from him. I still don't think Mizzou is going to make major headways this year. I think they're still going to be about a 500 team. Give me Georgia in this game against Mizzou. Then you have 2 back-to-back games against opponents that could very well trip you up. First off, you're at home against Ole Miss. Ole Miss last year was a little bit disappointing, but there's still people this year who think Ole Miss could probably contend for the West. They still got the Lane Kiffin and the high-powered offense. That's not a big question for them. The Ole Miss offense will be able to challenge Georgia, no problem. The question is, can their defense hold Georgia off the scoreboard? I don't think it will be able to hold Georgia off the scoreboard. Ole Miss, offensive-wise, has been good. Defensive-wise, not so much. I'm going to go with Georgia here, but just simply because I have way too many questions about Ole Miss's defense to give them the victory here. I'm thinking it's going to be Georgia yet again. But then after that, you come to a game that will decide, most likely, who wins the SEC East. And it is going to be against your rivals, the Tennessee Volunteers. Tennessee last year had the most unexpected season out of anybody. They went 11-2. They upset the Alabama Crimson Tide. They did struggle in South Carolina, but that might have just been an outlier. Or maybe they were looking too far ahead, thinking, oh, we can't be stopped. We could still get playoffs. But then they looked ahead of South Carolina. They still got a lot of talent, even though they lost their quarterback. And I have serious questions about that offensive line, if it can hold up. This game is in Tennessee. But I just think Tennessee's going to be a good team, but I'm not sure yet if they're going to be the team that everybody says that they could potentially win the SEC East. I have serious questions about the offensive line. Give me Georgia in this game. I think Georgia wins it easily. And then you got your rival, Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech has a new head coach, Brent Key. I think Georgia Tech is going to gradually get better under Brent Key. However, in year 1 under Brent Key, can they beat Georgia? No. I think Georgia wins this game. So there you go. I have Georgia in the regular season going 12-0. Now, they could trip up against Tennessee. Maybe they trip up against Ole Miss or even South Carolina or Kentucky. But I just think Georgia has become the unstoppable team of the SEC, and until they are stopped by somebody, I think maybe they could get stopped in the SEC championship against LSU or Alabama. Potentially the college football playoff, depending on who they face. But they just have too much talent, and until they are stopped, I just don't. I just can't be convinced that they can be stopped. Anyway, we're gonna continue with these prediction videos until the season starts. Last one will be Bama. The next one, I'm thinking I'm gonna go ahead and do the USC Trojans. However, until next time, this is Roll Tide 99. I'm out of here. I'll see y'all later.